welcome to my channel where we talk about cool cars, cool technology, and alternative fuels. This is version 2 of the solar panel system. This is a special look at an interim version between 1 and 3. This is a test version, a test bed, so to speak, for some of the stuff that I wanted to keep from version 1 and put on version 3, and some of the new stuff I wanted to put on version 3 that version 1 didn't have. This setup powers the same office as version 1. Version 1 has been dismantled completely, and a few of the parts have been reused, but this powers the same office as version 1. So we have a hotel air conditioner is the biggest load in the office, and then there's a couple of computers, a couple fans, lights, and that kind of thing. The inverter powering all the 120 volt stuff is a Ames modified sine wave inverter right here. It puts out about, I think this one's rated at 2,000 watts continuous, and behind it you see a giant transformer on top of another 2,000 watt inverter. That is a test object that I was working with, a transformer. What's supposed to be there is a 5,000 watt modified sine wave 220 volt inverter. That inverter had a problem. It was a cheaper version, a cheaper inverter, and it just, something went wrong with it, and I think it got too hot in here. This building gets very, very hot. It's not insulated, and we are down here in Houston, and so it gets extremely hot, about 140 degrees in this building, and the cooling fan, which is that kind of pedestal fan back there that just had blowing some air across it, shut down. And that inverter couldn't keep up and didn't go into thermal cutback or thermal shutdown. It just exploded inside. So that inverter is missing, but that's what's supposed to be there, is a 5,000 watt continuous modified sine wave 220 volt inverter. Moving up from that, I've got different control relays, and then the low voltage battery detectors, just like version 1 had. All these relays control the, like I have them labeled here, they do the spark, the fuel, the starter, for the backup generator, which we carried over from version 1, and then the 2 relays on the end here, they control the power going to the rest of the system here. So in the middle row, there are a ton of time delay relays. They are the time delay relays. There's one for each of the, or actually there's 2 for each of the transfers. So there's 3 positions, if you remember from version 1, there's 3 positions that this system runs in. It can be in emergency backup generator mode if the grid fails. It can be in emergency grid mode if the solar system either runs out of power, which is detected by these 2 low voltage battery detectors, or it can be, or if the inverter fails, it can go into a grid emergency. Or if everything's working great and the batteries are charged up, everything's working fine, it can be in the mode it's supposed to be in, which is solar panel power. So for each of the modes, we have 2 delays. A delay on, so a delay to connect that mode, and then a delay to disconnect that mode to make sure that the transfer switches don't slam and like connect and then disconnect, connect, disconnect, and do crazy stuff, which is what happened in version 1, and things didn't go quite right. So there's some delay relays there. And on the end here are the actual transfer switches. If you'll notice, they're a giant step up from version 1. They are 40 amp big contactors. They're 12 volt DC coils, just like in version 1, but much bigger. The ones in version 1 were rated for 80 amps. That's not true. They were rated for 80 amps, but could not handle it. These can handle their rating of 40 amps, which is plenty for the office we're powering. So the first 3 on the end here do the L1, L2, and neutral of the generator. And then moving on down, we've got the, this one here is the power for the 220 volt inverter. This one here is the neutral for the 110 volt inverter. And this one is the other leg for the 220 volt inverter. And then down here, we've got the neutral for the 220 volt inverter. And yes, the 220 volt inverter has a neutral. It's set up kind of like European power, where it's 220 volts, but you've got a hot and a neutral. And so it's set up a little weird because it's not a split phase inverter. And then at the very end, there's a contactor for the auxiliary battery chargers, which if the batteries get super low, it can kick in using this detector, kick in some battery chargers to raise the voltage in the batteries. So, moving around the table, there's a breaker box for the circuits in the office. Each one of those breakers corresponds to a circuit in the office, and then the panel next to that is a breaker box for the air conditioner, service disconnect, and at the very end is a breaker box for the power coming into the whole system, so the grid power coming in. Now this system has the same 1800 watt solar panel rack as version 1. It has a different battery setup though. These are AGM batteries, so I was testing out some AGM batteries. Are they better than lead acid for solar panels overall? And I've come to the conclusion, yes, they're much better. The original batteries from version 1 failed prematurely, extremely prematurely. They failed within a year. As a matter of fact, by a year and 3 months, every single battery had failed. And that was due to a quality control problem at Johnson Battery Controls that I looked up, and sure enough, quality control problem at Johnson Battery Controls, which is the company who made those batteries. It's kind of a huge loss because it was a ton of batteries, but tried AGMs and they worked out well. There are 6 AGM 12-volt batteries. They're wired in parallel. It's still a 12-volt solar panel system. Version 3, which is currently in progress, is functioning, but is still currently being tinkered with, is a 48-volt system. So that's a big, huge difference. A lot less losses from the big giant cables going to the roof in version 3 than in this version. And this is really just an interim version to test to see, do the bigger contactors work, do the time delays work, what kind of inverter should I go with, and that kind of thing. So it's along the same specifications as version 1, but just kind of a real quick update here on what's been going on. Thank you very much.